Chapter 1. Broken Foundations. Harold Cummins sat in his downtown office, the city's evening glow filtering through Venetian blinds as he reviewed security footage from the Meridian Hotel. 23 years of marriage, dissolved in a courtroom 6 months ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who'd spent 15 years protecting national secrets couldn't protect his own family. The divorce papers still stung, not for the money or the house, but for what Catherine had written in her testimony. Harold lives in shadows, always suspicious, always paranoid. I need a partner who exists in the real world. Her words echoed as he watched another cheating spouse case unfold on his monitor. His daughter Paige knocked and entered without waiting, a habit she'd inherited from her mother. At 17, she carried herself with the same determined grace that had first attracted him to Catherine Palmer 25 years ago. "Dad, about tonight's dinner." She began, then noticed his expression. "You're not going, are you?" Harold minimized the surveillance feed. "It's complicated, sweetheart. It's Mom's engagement party. To Oscar." She sat across from him, green eyes that mirrored his own filled with concern. "You know I don't like him, right?" Something in her tone made Harold look up sharply. "What do you mean?" Paige fidgeted with her phone. "He asks too many questions about you. About your work, your clients. And the way he looks at me." She shuddered. "Mom says I'm being dramatic, but there's something wrong with him, Dad." Harold's instincts, honed by years in intelligence, prickled. "What kind of questions?" "Like, who you meet with. If you keep files at home." He even asked if you still have contacts from your old job. She leaned forward. "Mom told him you were just some government paper pusher, but Oscar doesn't believe her. He keeps digging." The pieces began forming a picture Harold didn't like. Oscar Frost, career diplomat, recently assigned to the embassy's Trade Development Office. Too interested in a supposedly retired bureaucrat's activities. Too smooth, too perfect, arriving just as Harold's marriage crumbled. "Paige, I need you to be very careful around Oscar. If he asks more questions." "I know, Dad. Trust no one, verify everything." She smiled sadly. "You taught me well." Harold's secure phone buzzed. A text from an encrypted number. "Package delivered. Embassy gala tomorrow. Time to collect." He'd been working this case for 8 months, tracking weapons shipments through diplomatic channels. The source that had finally broken open the smuggling ring was risking everything to meet him tomorrow night. And now Oscar Frost was asking questions about Harold's connections. "Dad," Paige's voice pulled him back. "You're doing that thing where you disappear behind your eyes." "Sorry. Listen, maybe you should stay at your aunt's this weekend. Just until." "Until what?" "Until you figure out if my soon-to-be stepfather is some kind of criminal." She stood, pacing to the window. "I already know he is, Dad. I can feel it. But Mom won't listen." Harold joined her at the window, watching the city traffic below. "Your mother thinks she's found security with Oscar. Stability. She found a liar with a nice car and diplomatic immunity." Paige's voice carried a bitterness too mature for her years. "He's using her, isn't he?" The truth was probably worse than Paige suspected, but Harold couldn't voice those fears. "Not yet. I'm going to the gala tomorrow night." "Good. Maybe you can finally prove to Mom what he really is." As Paige left for her mother's house, Harold opened his secure laptop and began reviewing everything he knew about Oscar Frost. Cultural attaché, stationed in 3 different conflict zones over the past decade. Impressive portfolio of legitimate diplomatic work, but Harold had learned to read between the lines. The real Oscar Frost was selling weapons to insurgent groups, using diplomatic pouches to move laundered money, and somehow orchestrating his relationship with Catherine to get closer to Harold's intelligence network. The question was, how much did he know about Harold's real background? Harold's phone rang. Catherine's number. "Harry, I know this is awkward, but I wanted to invite you personally to the engagement party tomorrow." Her voice still made something twist in his chest. "I don't think that's a good idea, Kath." Oscar insisted. "He said it would mean a lot to him to meet you properly, to understand the man who raised Paige." A pause. "Please, Harry. For our daughter." The manipulation was subtle but clear. Oscar wanted Harold there for a reason, and he was using Catherine as bait. "I'll be there," Harold said. After ending the call, he opened his safe and retrieved a small device. A signal booster that would ensure his earpiece worked throughout the embassy building. Tomorrow night, Oscar Frost would learn that some secrets were worth killing for. Chapter 2. The Diplomat's Game. Oscar Frost adjusted his cufflinks as he reviewed the guest list for tomorrow's gala, cross-referencing names with intelligence profiles. The embassy's main ballroom would host senators, military attaches, and business leaders, perfect cover for what needed to happen. "You're nervous," Catherine observed from the bedroom doorway, elegant in her silk robe. At 43, she maintained the poise that had first caught his attention at a charity auction 8 months ago. The fact that she was Harold Cummins' wife had made her irresistible. Not nervous. Focused. Oscar closed the laptop and pulled her close. "Tomorrow changes everything for us." What Catherine didn't know was that us didn't include her. She'd served her purpose, providing intelligence about her ex-husband's capabilities and connections. The divorce had been surprisingly easy to orchestrate. A few anonymous tips about Harold's paranoid behavior, some carefully staged encounters to make Oscar seem like a stable alternative, and Catherine had walked away from 23 years of marriage. "I still can't believe Harry's coming," she said, settling onto the bed. "You two are going to love each other." Oscar suppressed a smile. Harold Cummins wasn't the burned-out government clerk Catherine believed him to be. His real identity, former NSA operative specializing in international arms trafficking, made him extraordinarily dangerous to Oscar's operation, but also potentially useful if properly motivated. "Tell me again about his work," Oscar said, pouring wine for both of them. "I've told you everything, darling. He was some kind of analyst. Boring reports about trade regulations. Why are you so interested?" "Because he's important to you. And Paige clearly adores him." Oscar sipped his wine, studying Catherine's face. "I want to understand what made him so protective. Paranoid, even." Catherine's expression darkened. 23 years of marriage, and I never really knew what he did all day. He'd disappear for weeks, come home with cuts and bruises he'd never explain. Always looking over his shoulder, always suspicious of everyone. She curled into Oscar's arm. "I couldn't live like that anymore." Perfect. Harold's operational security had cost him his marriage, making him vulnerable. Isolated. Oscar's secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "Cummins has been asking questions about your weapons shipments. He has a source inside the Syrian operation. Eliminate the threat, or we terminate the partnership." His handlers in Damascus weren't known for patience. For 3 years, Oscar had used his diplomatic status to move weapons and money through conflict zones, earning millions while maintaining his respectable cover. Harold Cummins threatened to expose everything. But killing a former intelligence operative required finesse. Too obvious, and it would trigger investigations. Too subtle, and Harold might escape to reveal what he knew. The solution had presented itself when Oscar learned about Paige. 17, idealistic, and utterly devoted to her father. The perfect pressure point. "Oscar." Catherine's voice broke his thoughts. "You disappeared for a moment there. Just thinking about tomorrow. About our future." He kissed her forehead, the gesture tender and false. "Everything's going to be perfect." The next morning, Oscar reviewed his plan with clinical precision. The embassy gala provided multiple advantages: diplomatic immunity, controlled environment, and plausible deniability. Harold would attend, expecting to meet his source and expose Oscar's operation. Instead, he'd find his daughter in immediate danger and face an impossible choice. Chuck Foley, Oscar's security chief and former mercenary, knocked on the office door. "Package is secured, boss." "Pretty girl. Shame about what happens next." "Business is business," Oscar replied coldly. "Is the sedan ready?" Blue diplomatic vehicle, tinted windows, parked in the embassy garage. "If Cummins doesn't cooperate, we can have her out of the country within the hour." Oscar nodded, checking his Rolex. "And the source?" "Neutralized this morning. Looked like a robbery gone wrong." Chuck's smile was unpleasant. "Your Syrian friends send their regards." The irony was delicious. Harold would come to the gala believing he was about to bring down an arms dealer, not knowing his source was already dead and his daughter was about to become a bargaining chip. The man who'd spent his career protecting national security couldn't protect the person who mattered most. "Sir." Chuck hesitated. "What if he calls our bluff? Cummins isn't the type to break easy." Oscar straightened his diplomatic pin, a small flag that represented immunity from prosecution. "Then we don't bluff. We follow through. Harold Cummins will learn that some games have no rules." As evening approached, Oscar practiced his performance in the mirror. Concerned stepfather-to-be, respectable diplomat, loving fiancé. The masks he wore so skillfully that sometimes he forgot which one was real. Tonight, Harold Cummins would discover that his greatest enemy wasn't a foreign government or terrorist organization. It was the man sleeping beside his ex-wife, sitting at his dinner table, and calling his daughter sweetheart. Chapter 3. Gathering Storms. Harold entered the embassy through the main entrance, his experienced eyes cataloging security cameras, exit routes, and potential threats. The building's Art Deco grandeur couldn't mask its fortress-like construction, 12-inch concrete walls, bulletproof glass, and enough surveillance equipment to monitor a small city. His earpiece crackled with static as he approached the metal detectors. "Falcon, this is Nest. Signal strength looks good. You're covered." The voice belonged to Rick Weaver, his former NSA partner who now ran a private intelligence firm. Rick's team was positioned across 3 buildings surrounding the embassy, ready to provide backup if Oscar's real game became clear. Copy Nest. Any word from Mockingbird? Harold used the code name for his Syrian source, a weapons dealer who'd grown disgusted with the civilian casualties caused by Oscar's operation. Negative. Radio silence since 0800 hours. A chill ran down Harold's spine, but he maintained his composed expression as embassy security waved him through. In the main ballroom, chandeliers cast warm light over Washington's elite, senators, generals, and diplomats mingling over champagne and state secrets. "Harry," Catherine appeared at his elbow, radiant in a midnight blue dress. "You look wonderful. Very handsome." The familiar ache returned. Even after everything, seeing her happy still affected him. "You look beautiful, Kath. Really. Come meet some people." Oscar's giving a speech later about the new trade initiatives. She guided him through the crowd, introducing him as "my ex-husband, the government analyst." Harold nodded politely while scanning faces, identifying potential threats. 2 men by the bar carried themselves like military contractors. A woman near the buffet kept checking her phone with the nervous energy of someone expecting instructions. Too many armed security guards for a simple diplomatic reception. "There he is," Catherine said warmly. "Oscar, darling, I'd like you to meet Harold." Oscar Frost approached with the confident smile of a man accustomed to winning. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than Harold's monthly rent. His handshake was firm, calculated. "Harold, such a pleasure to finally meet you properly." Oscar's accent carried hints of his multilingual background. "Catherine speaks of you constantly, and Paige adores her father." "Where's Paige tonight?" Harold asked, noting how Oscar's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "At home, studying. You know how seriously she takes her academics." Oscar sipped his champagne. "Though she was disappointed to miss the party. She specifically asked me to tell you hello." The lie was smooth but unnecessary. Paige had mentioned attending a friend's birthday party tonight. Harold's paranoia, as Catherine called it, began sending warning signals. "I'm curious about your work," Oscar continued. "Catherine mentioned you dealt with international trade regulations?" "Nothing exciting. Paperwork, mostly. Still, you must have developed quite a network over the years. People in various positions." Oscar's tone remained conversational, but his eyes were predatory. "I imagine someone with your background maintains interesting contacts." Harold smiled blandly. "Just fellow bureaucrats, I'm afraid." Oscar excused himself to greet other guests, but Harold noticed the security contractors had shifted position, now maintaining visual contact. His earpiece crackled. "Falcon, you've got company. 2 armed men, 3 o'clock. And there's a blue sedan in the embassy garage with diplomatic plates. Any movement?" "Negative, but the windows are too tinted to see inside." Harold circulated through the party, projecting calm while his mind raced. Oscar's questions weren't casual curiosity. They were interrogation techniques designed to map Harold's intelligence network. The extra security wasn't protecting dignitaries. They were containing threats. And Paige wasn't at a birthday party. "Ladies and gentlemen," Oscar's voice boomed over the PA system. "If I could have your attention for a moment." The crowd gathered around a small stage where Oscar stood beneath the embassy's official portraits. His smile was warm, politician perfect. "Tonight, we celebrate not just my engagement to the wonderful Catherine Palmer, but the strengthening of international partnerships that keep our world safe." Polite applause. These relationships require trust, discretion, and sometimes difficult choices. Harold's blood chilled at the emphasis on difficult choices. His earpiece crackled again. Falcon, we've got a problem. Thermal imaging shows one person in that sedan. Small frame, possibly female. Harold's hand instinctively moved toward his concealed weapon as Oscar continued his speech about mutual cooperation and necessary sacrifices. The diplomat's eyes found Harold in the crowd, and his smile became something else entirely. In my experience, Oscar said, his voice carrying easily through the ballroom, the most effective negotiations happen when all parties understand what they stand to lose. The message was clear. Harold scanned the room for exit routes while calculating distances to potential weapons. 20 years of operational training warred with paternal terror as he realized Oscar Frost had just declared war on everything Harold held dear. But two could play the manipulation game. Harold touched his earpiece, activating a broader communication channel. "This is Falcon. All stations, switch to operational frequency. We have a hostile situation." The party continued around them, diplomats and socialites oblivious to the deadly chess match unfolding in their midst. Harold caught Catherine's proud smile as she watched her fiancé's speech, having no idea she was witnessing her daughter's kidnapping being announced to the world. Oscar's eyes never left Harold's face as he concluded, "Here's to partnerships that endure any challenge." The toast that followed tasted like ashes in Harold's mouth. Chapter 4, The Last Gambit. Harold approached Oscar during the cocktail reception following the speech, maintaining the facade of polite small talk, while every instinct screamed danger. The diplomat stood near the embassy's main corridor, positioned perfectly to control access to the building's restricted areas. "Excellent speech," Harold said, accepting a fresh champagne flute from a passing waiter. "Very illuminating. I'm glad you appreciated it." Oscar's smile was sharper now, the political mask slipping. "Walk with me, Harold. I think it's time we had an honest conversation." They moved toward a quieter alcove near the embassy's private offices, away from the main crowd. Harold noted the positions of Oscar's security team, casual observers who'd somehow formed a loose perimeter around them. "Your daughter is a remarkable young woman," Oscar said suddenly. "Intelligent, principled. She reminds me of you, actually." Harold's grip tightened on his champagne flute. "What exactly are you trying to say, Oscar?" "I'm saying that family is precious. Irreplaceable." Oscar checked his Rolex. "And sometimes, protecting family requires making very difficult choices." Cut the diplomat speak. "What do you want?" Oscar's mask fell away completely, revealing something cold and predatory underneath. "I want the name of your source in the Syrian arms network. The one who's been feeding you information about diplomatic shipments." Harold's mind raced. How did Oscar know about the Syrian operation? More importantly, how much did he know about Harold's real background? "I think you have me confused with someone else," Harold said carefully. "I analyze trade regulations, remember?" "Please." Oscar's voice carried contempt. "NSA operative, 15 years active duty, specialized in international arms trafficking. Currently running a private investigation into weapons shipments through diplomatic channels." Shall I continue? The game was over. Harold's operational identity was blown, which meant Oscar had resources far beyond a simple corrupt diplomat. "What happened to my source?" "Traffic accident this morning. Very tragic." Oscar's smile was genuinely pleased. But not before he mentioned meeting with a retired American operative, someone with extensive knowledge of our Syrian operation. "Our operation? I've been facilitating arms transfers for 3 years, Harold. Very profitable work and completely protected by diplomatic immunity." Oscar stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Your investigation threatens to expose clients who don't appreciate publicity." Harold's earpiece crackled softly. "Falcon, thermal imaging confirms one person in the sedan. Appears to be restrained. Here's how this works," Oscar continued. "You're going to give me every piece of evidence you've collected, every contact in your network, and every backup plan you've established. In exchange, your daughter lives to see morning." The casual brutality of the threat hit Harold like a physical blow. "You son of a bitch. Business is business. And your business has become very inconvenient." Oscar gestured toward the ballroom. "Look around, Harold. Diplomatic immunity, controlled environment, dozens of witnesses who'll testify I never left their sight. Even if something unfortunate happens to Paige, you'll never prove I was involved." Harold forced himself to remain calm, drawing on decades of training. "Catherine would never forgive you if something happened to her daughter." Catherine will be devastated by her ex-husband's tragic breakdown, kidnapping his own daughter in a desperate attempt to frame her new fiancé. The suicide note you'll leave will be very convincing. The plan was diabolically clever. Oscar would eliminate Harold and Paige while maintaining his cover, inheriting Catherine's trust and grief. A perfect crime protected by diplomatic status. You have 5 minutes to decide, Oscar said, checking his watch again. My associates are waiting in the garage. Harold nodded slowly, as if accepting defeat. I need to make a call. To destroy the evidence remotely. Of course, but stay where I can see you. Oscar smiled triumphantly. And Harold? Don't do anything foolish. Paige is counting on you to make the right choice. Harold moved a few steps away, ostensibly to make his call, while actually activating his earpiece's emergency frequency. His voice was calm, conversational, just another boring government analyst making arrangements. At the embassy gala, my ex-wife's new husband, a diplomat, whispered, "Your daughter is in my car on her last few breaths. If you don't reveal your source, she..." Harold just smiled and tapped his earpiece, speaking loudly enough for Oscar to hear. Alpha Team. The target has identified himself. Package is in the blue sedan. Green light. Oscar's confident expression faltered as Harold's words registered. Around the ballroom, seemingly random guests began moving with military precision. The woman by the buffet was actually Lisa Noble, Harold's former NSA colleague. The nervous server was Sam Weber, currently with FBI counterintelligence. The maintenance worker adjusting a camera was Mohammed Turner, SEAL Team 6. He had just declared war on the entire agency. Harold continued, loud enough for everyone in the alcove to hear. Oscar reached for his phone, but Chuck Foley was already being detained by 2 men in diplomatic security uniforms, actually federal agents who'd been monitoring the embassy for months. You see, Oscar, Harold said conversationally, you made one critical error. You assumed I was working alone. The embassy's main lights flickered and went out, replaced by emergency lighting. In the confusion, Harold heard the distinctive sound of flashbang grenades detonating in the garage level. What the hell? Oscar began. Joint NSA-FBI operation. We've been tracking your weapons network for 8 months. Harold smiled genuinely for the first time that evening. My retirement was cover for the investigation. And your source? He was never my asset. He was yours, and we've been monitoring his communications since day one. Oscar's face went white as the implications hit him. The Syrian operation is completely fabricated, designed to make you reveal your real network. Harold's earpiece crackled with updates. Package secured. Subject is safe and unharmed. Relief flooded through Harold as Rick Weaver's voice confirmed Paige was alive. Around them, the diplomatic reception continued in chaos as federal agents moved through the crowd, arresting Oscar's security team and seizing evidence. Diplomatic immunity. Oscar started desperately. Doesn't apply to kidnapping American citizens, Harold interrupted. You crossed that line when you took my daughter. As federal agents approached with handcuffs, Oscar made one last desperate play. Catherine, this is all lies. Harold's having some kind of breakdown. But Catherine was staring at her fiancé with growing horror as the truth became clear. The man she trusted, planned to marry, had threatened her daughter's life. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Ma'am, Agent Noble said gently, we'll need you to come with us for debriefing. You're not in any trouble. Harold watched Oscar being led away in handcuffs, the diplomat's carefully constructed world crumbling in real time. 23 years of marriage might be over, but Harold's family was safe. And sometimes, that was victory enough. Chapter 5. Unraveling Truth. The embassy's basement had been converted into a temporary command center, computer screens casting blue light across Harold's face as he reviewed intercepted communications. 3 hours after Oscar's arrest, the full scope of the arms trafficking network was becoming clear. Jesus Christ, Harry. Rick Weaver dropped a thick file on the metal table. This goes way deeper than we thought. Oscar wasn't just moving weapons. He was brokering deals between terrorist organizations and rogue state actors. Agent Lisa Noble pulled up satellite imagery on the main monitor. We've identified weapons shipments to 7 different conflict zones over the past 3 years. Conservative estimate, 40,000 deaths directly attributable to weapons Oscar facilitated. Harold studied the data with clinical detachment, a skill learned during his NSA years. Emotional involvement clouded judgment, and judgment kept people alive. But seeing Oscar's kill count laid out in spreadsheets made something cold settle in his chest. "Where's Paige?" he asked. "Medical suite, 2 floors up." Shaken but unharmed. "Dr. Palmer is with her." Rick hesitated. "Catherine's asking for you, by the way. She's not handling this well." Harold could imagine. Learning that your fiancé was an international arms dealer while simultaneously discovering your ex-husband was still a covert operative would shatter anyone's worldview. "Sir." Agent Sam Weber approached with a laptop. "We've been analyzing Oscar's personal communications. There's something you need to see." The screen showed email exchanges between Oscar and an encrypted account. Harold's blood chilled as he read the messages. "The Cummins problem is more complex than anticipated. He's been tracking our operations for months. Recommend immediate termination." Response: negative. "He has intelligence value. Extract his network contacts before disposal. Use whatever leverage necessary. Target's daughter presents optimal pressure point. Recommend kidnapping/torture protocol." "He's been planning this for weeks," Harold said quietly. "This wasn't desperate improvisation. It was a systematic plan to torture information out of me using my own daughter." Rick nodded grimly. "Gets worse. Look at this." The next email thread made Harold's hands clench into fists. "Catherine Palmer remains useful as emotional leverage. After extraction, recommend disposal protocol. Make it look like suicide, grief over daughter's death, guilt over ex-husband's breakdown." "He was going to kill Catherine too," Agent Noble said softly. "After murdering Paige and extracting your intelligence. Clean sweep." Harold stared at the screen, processing the magnitude of Oscar's betrayal. Not just professional duplicity, but the calculated seduction and planned murder of a woman who trusted him completely. "There's more," Weber continued, pulling up financial records. "Oscar's been systematically draining Catherine's accounts. Joint investments, retirement funds, even Paige's college savings. Nearly $200,000 transferred to offshore accounts over the past 6 months. The pattern was clear now. Oscar had identified Harold as a threat, researched his vulnerabilities, and systematically exploited them, destroying his marriage to isolate him, seducing his ex-wife to gain intelligence and financial resources, planning to murder his daughter for leverage and his former spouse to eliminate witnesses." "Professional assessment?" Rick asked. "Textbook hostile recruitment operation," Harold replied. "Except instead of turning me into a double agent, he was planning to extract my network and eliminate me. Classic KGB methodology." That raises the question, who was he really working for? Agent Noble pulled up another file. Treasury Department tracked the money trail. Oscar's been receiving payments from shell companies linked to the Wagner Group, Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and at least 3 different arms cartels. "Freelancer," Harold concluded, selling to the highest bidder. The secure door opened, and Paige entered with Catherine close behind. Harold's daughter looked pale but determined. His ex-wife appeared devastated. "Dad," Paige said simply, crossing to hug him tightly. Harold held her, feeling the reality of how close he'd come to losing everything that mattered. Over her shoulder, he met Catherine's eyes. "I'm sorry," Catherine said quietly. "I should have listened when you tried to warn me. Should have trusted your instincts." "You couldn't have known," Harold replied gently. "Oscar's a professional. This is what he does." "No." Catherine's voice carried the weight of profound realization. "I knew something was wrong. Deep down, I knew. But I wanted the fairy tale so badly that I ignored every red flag." She approached the table of evidence, studying the financial records. "He stole Paige's college fund." Among other things, Agent Noble confirmed. Catherine's expression hardened. "What happens to him now?" "Federal charges for kidnapping, weapons trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder," Harold said. "He'll die in prison." "Good." The venom in Catherine's voice surprised everyone. "I want to testify. I want the world to know what kind of monster he really is." Paige looked up at her father. "Is it over?" Harold considered the question carefully. Oscar's arrest had decapitated the immediate threat, but networks like this had redundancies, backup plans. Other operatives who might seek revenge. Financial partners who wouldn't appreciate their investment being exposed. "The immediate danger is over," he said finally. "But we'll need to be careful for a while. Oscar's partners might not appreciate losing their American pipeline." Rick cleared his throat. Actually, there's something else. We found this in Oscar's embassy office. He produced a leather folder containing detailed surveillance photos of Harold's apartment, Paige's school, Catherine's new house, maps of their daily routines, license plate numbers, security codes, even veterinary records for the family dog. He's been planning this for months, Harold said, studying the intelligence. Complete operational profile on my family. The violation felt worse than physical assault. Oscar hadn't just threatened them. He'd studied them, mapped their lives, identified every vulnerability. There's one more thing, Weber said reluctantly. The medical examiner's report on your Syrian source. Harold looked up sharply. He really was killed? 3 bullets, close range. Professional execution. Weber paused. But the torture beforehand. Oscar's people didn't just kill him, Harry. They made him suffer. For hours. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. That could have been Paige. Would have been, if Harold hadn't played his hand correctly. I want to see him, Harold said suddenly. Harry, Rick began. I want to look Oscar Frost in the eye and make sure he understands exactly what he tried to destroy. Because now it wasn't just about justice. It was about ensuring that a predator who'd threatened his family understood the consequences of that choice. Chapter 6. Confrontation. The federal holding facility was a fortress of concrete and steel, designed to contain the worst threats to national security. Harold passed through 3 separate security checkpoints before reaching the interview room, where Oscar Frost waited in orange prison fatigues and shackles. The transformation was striking. Gone was the polished diplomat with his $1,000 suits and practiced charm. What remained was a middle-aged man with hollow eyes and the desperate energy of someone watching their entire world collapse. Harold. Oscar's voice carried none of its former confidence. I was wondering when you'd come. Harold took the chair across from him, studying the man who'd nearly destroyed his family. I wanted to see if you had any remorse, any understanding of what you tried to do. I was protecting my operation. Business is business. You were going to torture my daughter for information, then kill her, then kill Catherine. Harold's voice remained calm, conversational. That's not business. That's evil. Oscar laughed bitterly. Evil? I was selling weapons to the highest bidder. Your government does the same thing, just with better public relations. My government doesn't kidnap children to torture information out of their fathers. Doesn't it? Oscar leaned forward as much as his restraints allowed. How many children died in Syria because of weapons your NSA helped track? How many families destroyed by operations you participated in? Harold had wrestled with those questions for years. The moral complexity of intelligence work, the civilian casualties that resulted from necessary operations. But there was a difference between accepting collateral damage in service of larger goals and deliberately targeting innocents for personal profit. I never killed for money, Harold said simply. No, you killed for ideology. Much more noble. Oscar's sneer was ugly. At least I was honest about my motivations. You seduced my ex-wife to get closer to me. Planned to murder my daughter. Where's the honesty in that? For the first time, Oscar's facade cracked slightly. Catherine was an unexpected complication. You mean you actually started caring about her? I mean, she made it easy to forget this was just an operation. Oscar stared at the table. She believed in the fairy tale. Made me want to believe it too. Harold felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy. Catherine had that effect on people, the ability to see the best in others, even when that best barely existed. But not enough to spare her life, Harold pointed out. No. Oscar's voice was flat. Not enough for that. The honesty was somehow worse than the manipulation. At least deception suggested some recognition of moral boundaries. This casual admission that love, or something like it, had been insufficient to prevent murder revealed a soul completely corrupted. I need to know something, Harold said. How deep does this go? How many other operatives are there? Why would I tell you that? Because your partners are already cutting their losses. We intercepted communications planning your assassination. They consider you a liability now. That got Oscar's attention. His eyes sharpened with fear. They wouldn't dare. I have diplomatic immunity. Had diplomatic immunity. Past tense. And your partners aren't known for respecting legal niceties. Harold leaned back. Give me the network structure, and I'll make sure you're placed in protective custody. Stay silent, and you'll be dead within a week. Oscar was quiet for a long moment, calculating odds. You really think they'd kill me in federal custody? I think you've seen their operational methods firsthand. Professional torture, execution-style murders. They're not the type to leave loose ends. And if I cooperate, life in prison instead of death by shiv in the shower. Better deal than you offered my family. Oscar stared at his shackled hands. When he looked up, something had shifted in his expression, desperation replacing arrogance. There are 3 cells: Middle East, South America, and Eastern Europe. Each operates independently, but they share intelligence and resources. He paused. I was the North American coordinator. Diplomatic status made me invaluable for moving materials. Names. You don't understand. These people, they have resources you can't imagine. Government connections, military assets, unlimited funding. Names, Harold repeated. Oscar named 12 individuals across 4 countries, detailing their roles, methods, and current operations. Harold recorded everything, knowing each revelation would save lives while probably condemning Oscar to death. There's something else, Oscar said when he finished. A fail-safe protocol. What kind of fail-safe? If any coordinator is compromised, the others activate contingency plans. Random targets, maximum casualties, designed to send a message. Oscar's voice dropped to a whisper. They know you captured me, Harold, which means they know you're responsible. Harold felt ice in his veins. What kind of contingency plans? School shootings, mall attacks, anything to maximize innocent casualties and media coverage. Oscar smiled without humor. They call it the sword of Damocles. Ensure cooperation through the threat of random slaughter. The revelation changed everything. Harold's victory had potentially triggered a series of terrorist attacks designed to punish him for disrupting the network. When? Harold asked. 72 hours after my arrest. Unless they receive confirmation that all evidence has been destroyed and the investigation terminated. Harold checked his watch. 18 hours remaining. You son of a bitch. You planned this. I plan to extract your intelligence and eliminate you cleanly. This is Plan B. Oscar's eyes held malicious satisfaction. Even if you stop them all, more will come. You've made enemies with resources beyond your imagination. Harold stood to leave, then turned back. You made one critical error, Oscar. What's that? You assumed I'd fight this war alone. Harold left the prison with a clear understanding of what needed to happen next. Oscar's network had declared war on innocent civilians to punish one man's defiance. They were about to learn why that was a mistake. Chapter 7. The Network Falls. The NSA's crisis center hummed with activity as analysts tracked 17 potential targets across 6 major cities. Harold stood before a wall of monitors displaying real-time intelligence feeds, coordinating with FBI, ATF, and local law enforcement to prevent the threatened attacks. Confirming multiple weapons purchases in Chicago, Los Angeles, and Miami, Agent Noble reported. Automatic rifles, tactical gear, and explosive compounds. All purchased through straw buyers linked to Oscar's network. Timeline? Harold asked. 8 hours until the deadline. Maybe less if they decide to move early. Rick Weaver approached with a tablet full of intercepts. We've identified the trigger mechanism. Encrypted communications through a gaming platform, World of Warcraft guild channels. Clever bastards are using raid coordination chat to plan terrorist attacks. Harold studied the intelligence pattern. Oscar's network was more sophisticated than initially assessed. Professional-grade operational security, multiple contingency plans, and the ruthlessness to target schools and shopping centers to make a point. Sir, Agent Weber called from his workstation. Breakthrough on the communications intercept. We've identified 3 cell leaders, Curtis Hess in Chicago, Glenn Schneider in Los Angeles, and Theodore Travis in Miami. Known associates? All former military, discharged for disciplinary issues. Hess was Special Forces before an incident with civilian casualties in Afghanistan. Schneider, Marine Corps sniper, court-martialed for unauthorized kills. Travis, Navy EOD, kicked out for selling explosives on the black market. Harold processed the profiles. Trained killers with military skills and flexible morals. Exactly the type of personnel an international arms network would recruit. What's their psychological profile? He asked Dr. Genevieve Webster, the FBI's behavioral analyst. Classic mercenary mindset. Loyalty to money rather than ideology makes them predictable in some ways, dangerous in others. They'll follow orders as long as they're being paid, but they're also pragmatic enough to cut their losses if the situation becomes untenable. Meaning, if we can convince them the network is compromised beyond recovery, they might abandon the operation to save themselves. Harold had a different idea. Can we track their financial arrangements? Working on it, Agent Noble replied. Treasury Department is tracing payments through the shell companies we identified from Oscar's records. I need real-time access to their accounts. All of them. That would require NSA authorization Gamma 7 Alpha, Harold interrupted, providing his highest security clearance code. Priority 1 National Security Directive. The room fell silent as agents realized Harold was activating authorities normally reserved for imminent nuclear threats. Sir, Weber said carefully, Gamma 7 Alpha authorization allows for extra-legal financial operations. Are you planning? I'm planning to end this war before it starts, Harold replied. And sometimes that requires fighting by their rules. Over the next 3 hours, Harold orchestrated a financial assault on Oscar's network. Every bank account was frozen. Every shell company dissolved. Every cryptocurrency wallet emptied. The mercenaries preparing attacks in 3 cities watched their promised payments vanish in real time. Sir, we're receiving communications, Noble reported. The Chicago cell is requesting confirmation of payment status. Put it on speaker. Hess's voice crackled through the encrypted channel. Control, this is Bravo team. Payment failure showing on all accounts. Request immediate resolution or mission abort. Harold took the microphone, using software to mask his voice. Bravo team, this is Control. Stand by for instructions. Who the hell is this? Hess demanded. You're not our handler. Your handler is in federal custody. Your network is compromised. Your accounts are frozen. And you have 30 seconds to abort mission and disappear before federal agents arrive at your location. The silence stretched for 20 seconds before Hess responded. How do we know you're not bluffing? Because in 10 seconds, every news outlet in Chicago will receive a tip about an armed terrorist cell planning an attack on Lincoln Elementary School. You'll be surrounded by FBI SWAT teams before you can reach your weapons. Harold nodded to Agent Weber, who triggered the media alert he'd prepared. 5 seconds, Harold continued. Federal agents are en route. This is your only warning. Bravo team is aborting, Hess replied tersely. We're ghosts. Similar conversations played out with the Los Angeles and Miami cells. Faced with exposure, frozen finances, and incoming law enforcement, the mercenaries chose survival over mission completion. All 3 cells confirm mission abort, Noble reported. Local authorities are moving to arrest, but the primary targets appear to be scattering. Let them run, Harold said. We've achieved the objective. Sir, Weber looked confused. Shouldn't we arrest the terrorists? We've broken the network and prevented the attacks. The individual operatives will be tracked down eventually, but right now our priority is dismantling the command structure. Harold turned to the main monitor displaying a world map with highlighted locations. Pull up the names Oscar gave us. Eastern Europe Cell, South America Operations, Middle East Coordinators. We're not just stopping today's attacks. We're ending the entire organization. What followed was a coordinated international intelligence operation. Working with allies in 12 countries, Harold's team systematically dismantled every aspect of Oscar's weapons network. Bank accounts were seized, operatives arrested, and weapons shipments interdicted. Final tally, Agent Noble announced 6 hours later. 47 arrests across 9 countries. 200 million in seized assets. And intelligence leading to 17 other criminal organizations. Harold studied the results with professional satisfaction. Oscar's attempt to punish him for disrupting the network had instead provided the intelligence needed to destroy it completely. One last item, Rick said, approaching with a secure tablet. Message from the Syrian source's brother. He wanted you to know that justice has been served. Harold read the brief note thanking him for exposing the people responsible for his brother's death. Sometimes the work felt abstract, spreadsheets and satellite imagery tracking faceless criminals. But behind every operation were real people whose lives had been destroyed by men like Oscar Frost. Sir, Agent Weber called. Call for you on the secure line. Says it's urgent. Harold accepted the phone, recognizing the voice of his former NSA director. Outstanding work, Cummins. The president wants to personally thank you for preventing those attacks. Just doing my job, sir. Well, your job just got more complicated. We've identified 3 more networks using similar methods. How do you feel about coming out of retirement officially? Harold looked around the crisis center, thinking about Paige and Catherine waiting for him at home. About Oscar sitting in his cell, watching his life's work crumble. About the families who would never know how close they'd come to losing everything. I'll consider it, he said. But first, I have a family dinner to attend. Chapter 8, Justice Served. 6 months later, Harold sat in a federal courthouse watching Oscar Frost receive 3 consecutive life sentences for terrorism, weapons trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. The man who'd once commanded diplomatic receptions now stood in shackles, his legal team having failed to negotiate any reduction in charges. Judge Maxine Griffith reviewed the sentencing documents with careful precision. Mr. Frost, in my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely encountered such a calculated disregard for human life. Your actions resulted in thousands of deaths across multiple conflict zones, and your attempt to murder a child to coerce her father represents the worst form of moral corruption. Oscar stood silently as his fate was pronounced. No diplomatic immunity, no plea bargains, no mercy from a system he'd tried to manipulate. Harold felt a quiet satisfaction watching justice unfold with bureaucratic efficiency. Furthermore, the judge continued, the court accepts the government's evidence that you pose a continuing threat to national security and orders that you be held in ADX Florence under special administrative measures. You will spend the remainder of your life in solitary confinement. ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, where the worst terrorists and spies disappeared forever. Harold had suggested that placement personally, ensuring Oscar would never again threaten innocent people. As bailiffs led Oscar away, he caught Harold's eye one final time. No defiance remained, just the hollow stare of a man who'd gambled everything and lost completely. Outside the courthouse, Catherine waited with Paige beside a rental car. The 3 of them had driven down from D.C. together, not quite a family anymore, but something more than strangers. How do you feel? Catherine asked as Harold joined them. Justice was served, he replied simply. I mean really, how do you feel about watching someone you once? Well, someone who was part of our lives get sentenced to die in prison. Harold considered the question. 6 months ago, he might have felt vindicated, triumphant. Now he just felt tired. I feel like Paige is safe. You're safe. And Oscar can never hurt anyone else's family. He looked at his daughter. That's enough. Paige had grown during the ordeal, developing an edge of cynicism that pained Harold but probably served her well. She'd learned that people could lie with perfect sincerity, that charm could mask evil intentions, and that the adults she trusted weren't always capable of protecting her. College decision? He asked, changing the subject. Georgetown. International relations. Paige smiled. Turns out having a front row seat to an international conspiracy gives you perspective on career choices. You sure you want to get into this business? Someone has to stop the next Oscar Frost, she said with quiet determination. Might as well be someone who understands what's at stake. Harold felt proud and terrified in equal measure. His daughter was choosing to enter a world of deception and danger, but she was doing it with full knowledge of the costs. What about you? Catherine asked as they drove through downtown traffic. Rick mentioned the NSA wants you back full-time. They offered me a position heading a new task force. International networks, financial crimes, technology threats. Harold navigated around a construction zone. Basically, hunting people like Oscar. Are you taking it? I am. Catherine nodded slowly. I understand why you have to do this work, Harry. I didn't before, but I do now. Someone like Oscar. He would have kept destroying lives until someone stopped him. The admission meant more to Harold than the judge's sentence. For 23 years, Catherine had seen his work as paranoid obsession with imaginary threats. Learning that some threats were all too real had changed her perspective on everything. There's something else, Harold said carefully. The task force position comes with certain requirements. New identity protocols, enhanced security measures for family members. Meaning Paige would need protection during college. You'd need security assessments for your house, your job, your daily routines. He glanced at her. Oscar had partners who might seek revenge. Not immediately, but eventually. Catherine was quiet for several miles. How long? Years, maybe. Until we're certain all the network elements have been eliminated. So this isn't over. The immediate threat is over. But people like Oscar don't work alone, and their associates have long memories. Harold had debated sharing this information, but Catherine deserved to understand the ongoing risks. Oscar's arrest had made enemies who might surface years later, seeking revenge or simply eliminating witnesses. "I have a proposal," Catherine said suddenly. "Move back into the house." Harold nearly swerved off the road. "What? Not romantically. Just practically. If we're all going to need security anyway, it makes sense to consolidate resources. Paige will be safer with you around, and honestly, so will I." "Kath, I'm not talking about reconciliation, Harry. I'm talking about family safety. We can figure out the emotional aspects later." From the back seat, Paige spoke up. "I think it's a good idea. We work better as a team than as separate targets." Harold considered the practical advantages. Unified security, shared intelligence, coordinated protection protocols. The personal complications would be challenging, but the operational benefits were undeniable. "There would have to be rules," he said. "Clear boundaries, defined expectations. Of course. And if either of us finds someone else, we'll address that if it happens." Harold made the decision that felt right professionally and personally. "Okay, let's try it." As they drove toward home, a concept that suddenly had new meaning, Harold reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. 6 months ago, he'd been divorced, estranged from intelligence work, and watching his family slip away. Now he was returning to both his career and his family, albeit under circumstances he never could have imagined. "Dad," Paige's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Yeah. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for being worth saving." It wasn't the happy ending Harold had once imagined, but it was something better, an honest beginning, built on truth instead of illusion. Oscar Frost's attempt to destroy them had instead taught them what really mattered. And sometimes, that was victory enough. Chapter 9, New Foundations. 1 year later, Harold stood in his old kitchen, now his kitchen again, preparing dinner while Paige worked on her Georgetown application essays at the table. The house felt different now, charged with an awareness that safety was something you built rather than something you assumed. "Dad, what's another word for a life-changing experience that doesn't sound like a cliché?" Paige asked, pen poised over her personal statement. "Transformative? Paradigm shifting," Harold suggested, testing pasta for doneness. "Too academic. I want something that captures how completely wrong I was about everything." Harold understood. The embassy gala had shattered Paige's assumptions about trust, safety, and the people closest to her. Growing up as the daughter of a supposed bureaucrat, she'd had no framework for understanding predators like Oscar. "How about revelatory?" Catherine suggested, entering through the back door with grocery bags. "It means something that reveals hidden truths." "Perfect," Paige made a note. "Mom, Professor Travis wants to interview you about diplomatic security protocols. Apparently having your fiancé turn out to be an international arms dealer qualifies as relevant experience." Catherine laughed, a sound that still surprised Harold with its warmth. The past year had been complicated, rebuilding trust while maintaining emotional distance. They shared a house, but not a bedroom, coordinated schedules, but not lives. It was working somehow. "How was your day?" Harold asked as Catherine unpacked groceries. "Productive. The State Department wants to implement new psychological screening for diplomatic personnel. Turns out Oscar wasn't the only charming sociopath with government credentials." Harold's NSA task force had uncovered 12 other cases of corrupt diplomats facilitating criminal operations. Oscar's arrest had triggered a complete review of security protocols across multiple agencies. "Any word on the appeals court decision?" Harold asked. "Denied. Oscar's life sentences stand." Catherine's expression hardened slightly. His lawyers argued that diplomatic immunity should have protected him from prosecution. The court disagreed. Harold felt satisfied but not surprised. Federal judges weren't impressed by legal technicalities when children's lives were at stake. His secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "New intelligence on Damascus operation. Meeting tomorrow 0800. "Work?" Catherine asked, recognizing his expression. "Always work." Harold set the phone aside. But nothing urgent. That was another adjustment, learning to compartmentalize operational security without excluding his family entirely. Catherine and Paige knew he was tracking international criminal networks, but specific details remained classified. "Speaking of work," Paige said, "I finished my essay about career goals. Want to hear it?" "Absolutely." Paige cleared her throat and read. My father spent 15 years protecting national security while I believed he analyzed trade regulations. My mother fell in love with a diplomat who planned to murder us both for money. These experiences taught me that the most dangerous threats often were the most trustworthy faces. I want to study international relations to understand how people like Oscar Frost gain power and how we can stop them before they destroy innocent lives. Harold felt proud and concerned in equal measure. It's excellent. But are you sure you want to advertise your family's connection to a major terrorism case? Georgetown's admissions committee will do a background check anyway. Better to address it directly than let them wonder. Catherine nodded approvingly. Honesty is strategy. I like it. Dinner conversation ranged from Paige's college plans to Catherine's new job with the State Department's Inspector General's office. The normalcy felt surreal sometimes, a family dinner after everything they'd survived. I have an announcement, Catherine said as they cleared dishes. I've been offered a position with the UN's Office of Internal Oversight Services. Based in Geneva. Harold stopped loading the dishwasher. That's significant. It's a 3-year assignment. Investigating corruption in peacekeeping operations. Catherine's voice was carefully neutral. Good opportunity for career advancement. And personally? Harold asked. Personally, it feels like time to build something new. For myself, Harold understood. Catherine had spent a year rebuilding her sense of judgment after Oscar's betrayal. Taking an overseas assignment would demonstrate confidence in her ability to assess threats and opportunities independently. What about security concerns? He asked. UN positions come with protection protocols. And honestly, Geneva is probably safer than Washington for someone with my background. When would you leave? 6 months. After Paige starts college. Paige looked between her parents. This is good, right? Mom getting her dream job. It's very good, Harold agreed, meaning it. Your mother deserves recognition for her skills. What he didn't say was that Catherine's departure would eliminate the personal complications of their current arrangement while maintaining family safety. She'd be protected by UN security, Paige would be at Georgetown with campus police and Harold's discreet surveillance, and he'd be free to focus on hunting the kind of people who'd threatened his family. There's one condition, Catherine added. I want to know that you'll both be safe while I'm gone. Enhanced security protocols for both of us, Harold assured her. Paige's dormitory will have upgrades, and my task force operates with full NSA protection. That evening, after Paige left for a friend's house, Harold and Catherine sat on the back porch with coffee, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Are we doing the right thing? Catherine asked. Splitting up the family again just when we've found our balance? We're doing what works for each of us individually, Harold replied, which is probably the healthiest foundation for any relationship. Even if that relationship ends up being friendship rather than marriage. Harold considered the question. Especially then. We've learned to trust each other again. That's more valuable than romance. Catherine smiled. You know, I think I'm finally understanding what attracted me to you 25 years ago. What's that? Your absolute clarity about what matters. I used to think it was obsession, but it's actually wisdom. Harold felt something settle in his chest. Not resolution exactly, but acceptance. They'd built something new from the wreckage of their marriage. Honest partnership based on shared values rather than romantic illusion. Oscar was right about one thing, Harold said quietly. What? Family is precious. Irreplaceable. He met her eyes. Worth any sacrifice to protect. As stars emerged in the darkening sky, Harold reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, Oscar Frost had tried to destroy them by exploiting their weaknesses. Instead, he'd forced them to discover their strengths. Paige was preparing for a career in international relations with full knowledge of its dangers and importance. Catherine was rebuilding her professional identity with confidence in her abilities. And Harold was returning to the work he'd been born to do, protecting innocent people from predators like Oscar Frost. Not the ending any of them had expected, but perhaps the one they needed. Harold's phone buzzed with another encrypted message. 3 new networks identified. Your team is requested for immediate assignment. He smiled and stood to answer the call. There was work to do, family to protect, and justice to serve. The last gambit had become a new beginning. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.